Hey, what's happening today, everybody? Welcome into the fourth edition of Unwritten Rules with Tmac. I'm excited to be here with you all. Just finished up a week number 2 of the NFL season here with the Monday Night Football game between the Eagles and the Falcons. Unbelievable football game. It seems like every primetime game so far this season through the first 2 weeks has come down to either the last play or the last couple of minutes of the game, which is NFL drama that you love to see. So we'll get a little bit into just the recaps of the week 2 here and what teams looked good, what teams didn't look so good. We'll cover over the against the spread picks that I gave to you guys last episode. Again, we had 5 different against the spread picks that I gave to you guys. We'll check out the results and how I did, and we'll discuss a little bit about why those teams either did or did not cover the spread. We'll discuss a little bit about the MLB playoffs and the updated races. The American League wild card is starting to heat up a little bit over the past couple of days as the Minnesota Twins have continued to scuffle a little bit while the Tigers and the Mariners continue to win. So the final playoff spot might be looking pretty interesting there. And then we had UFC on Saturday, a couple of big title fights there, one in the women's division, one in the men's division. So we'll go ahead and cover a little bit of the results that happened from Saturday in the Sphere in Las Vegas at UFC, which was probably the biggest UFC event to date so far for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So we got a lot of stuff to get to today. I hope you guys enjoy. And we're going to go ahead and get off and running here. So week 2, like I said, Eagles-Falcons just ended. Unbelievable game. Game that the Eagles probably should have won. It seems terrible clock management by the coach. 22-21. Falcons over the Eagles. Game-winning drive. Under 30 seconds remaining. Kirk Cousins goes right down the field and puts the Eagles to bed. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the game-winning drive here, or the game-winning pass, so that way you can see. But basically, the Eagles had 3rd down and 2 or 3 yards inside the 20-yard line of the Falcons. All they had to do was pick up 1 first down, clock runs out, game's over. Even if you don't get the first down, if you run the ball, Falcons have no timeouts. You maybe leave them with 45 to 50 seconds left on the clock instead of a minute and a half like what ended up happening. Basically, Nick Sirianni, head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, decides to run a screen pass play or a little out route for the running back, Saquon Barkley. Barkley drops a wide open pass that easily would have given him the first down. Yeah, he should have caught the ball. But as the head coach, you should have ran the damn ball. You run the ball, you burn the clock, the Falcons have no timeouts, they get it with 45 seconds. It's a lot more pressure on them to move the ball down the field and get in the end zone, not being able to stop the clock. Kirk Cousins gets the ball back, about a minute 40 left, goes 76 yards, 6 for 7, down the field, and throws the game-winning touchdown, which I'm going to show you right here. This was the play that sealed the deal.
Cousins looks right.
Unbelievable route by Drake London there, number 5. Darius Slay, number 2, the guy guarding him, is one of the top corners in the NFL. After the game, you could see them meet each other at the middle of the field, and Darius Slay said, "Hey, great route, man, great route." That was, unbelievable. Gave him some props because he burned him. I mean, that's what it came down to. He faked to the inside. Darius Slay fell for it. He did an out route to the corner of the end zone, and that's all she wrote for the Eagles. They weren't able to get the ball back and score. Jalen Hurts threw an interception after they got the ball back when he was trying to go deep to Devontae Smith. And just like that, the Eagles are 1-1. The Atlanta Falcons are 1-1. We'll move on here. So last week, and a few days ago, I gave you guys 5 picks for this weekend for Sunday for against the spread. And I'm pretty proud of myself. I went 4-1 this week, just so that way you guys can remember here the teams that I chose. We had or the games that I chose, not the teams, but the games that I chose, I took San Francisco -5 points against the Minnesota Vikings. That was my only loss of the week. The Vikings and Sam Darnold, I mean, I'm a known Sam Darnold trash talker. There ain't no doubt about it. He has not been good since he came into the league after he was hyped up. And through the first 2 weeks with the Vikings this year, he looks like a completely different quarterback, which credit to him, props to him for continuing to work hard. But the San Francisco 49ers looked nothing like they did in week 1 to week 2. In week 1, they dominated the New York Jets, made the Jets look like they had a roster that was not even going to make the playoffs. They looked like the far superior team. Week 2 rolls around. You're still without Christian McCaffrey, but after watching what Mason did last week, you were pretty confident that that wasn't going to be an issue as far as the run game, and it didn't really seem to be too much of an issue. The Vikings just played some great defense, and Sam Darnold threw some unbelievable balls and some unbelievable passes that caused the 49ers not to, not have a chance to win and not have a chance to compete, really. It was a 23-17 game. So the Vikings actually won outright. It's not that they just covered the underdog spread of +5. They beat the 49ers, and they beat them handedly, in my opinion. So we'll have to see how the 49ers can bounce back. Another major injury as Deebo Samuel came down with a calf strain, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be available for a couple weeks. So now you're down Christian McCaffrey. You're going to be down Deebo Samuel, and it's going to be an interesting few weeks for the 49ers for them to be able to figure out what they're going to do on offense and how to best attack the teams that they have coming up. So only loss of the week against the spread was San Francisco. I took -5 against the Vikings. So we're going to roll through the wins here really quick. So the ones that I hit on out of the 5, we had Chargers -5 against the Carolina Panthers. Chargers win 26-3, easy cover, dominated the offense and defensive line. Bryce Young looked completely lost, like he had no idea what was going on the field. His body language wasn't good. Every single drive was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out for I think the first 4 or 5 drives of the game. They didn't get a single first down, and they brought in this Dave Canales guy who was the offensive coordinator. For I believe it was the Detroit Lions. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator last season. Really was credited with turning Baker Mayfield around, as he had a great year last year, and they were hoping that he would be able to do the same with Bryce Young, their up-and-coming quarterback who they took in the first round a couple years back. And through the first 2 games, it does not look that way. The Carolina Panthers ended up having a pretty short fuse with Bryce Young. Shortly after the game, or the day after the game today here on Monday or Tuesday, they announced that Andy Dalton, a seasoned veteran, former Cincinnati Bengal, was going to be taking over as the starting quarterback next week for the Carolina Panthers. Not the look I don't think the Carolina Panthers want. You traded away some unbelievable talent, very high draft picks. I mean, the Bears had your first round pick, which turned into Caleb Williams for him this year because that was part of the trade you had for Bryce Young a couple years back. It might go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history if Bryce Young doesn't figure out what's going on and how to adapt to the NFL gameplay. But easy win on against the spread. Chargers were favored by 5. They win by 23, 26-3. We hit that one. On to the second win of the week, we had the Saints +6 versus the Dallas Cowboys, and the Saints win outright big, 44-19. Didn't need us to even give them 6 points. They ended up winning by 25. The Cowboys defense looked awful 2 weeks in a row. The Cowboys defense has not been great. Dan Quinn no longer there, the head coach of the Washington Commanders. Completely different defense so far this year through 2 games. They're going to need to figure something out to slow some people down. Obviously, Dak Prescott's got to play better. Can't be throwing interceptions like he has been. But the Dallas Cowboys might be in some serious trouble. Mike McCarthy will be on the hot seat again here before soon if they don't figure something else out. But what a dominant performance from the Saints. Is Derek Carr for real? That's kind of a question I think we've asked a few different years over the past maybe 3 or 4 years. Is Derek Carr for real. He took the Raiders to the playoffs one year. They beat the Chargers, on the last second field goal. Knocked the Chargers out of the playoffs 2 years ago. Got themselves into the playoffs, and everybody thought Derek Carr was going to be doing just all right. Didn't end up working out for him in Oakland. Ends up signing with the Saints. Last year didn't seem like was a very good year for Derek Carr. The Saints weren't very good. But to start this year through the first 2 weeks, Derek Carr, I mean, granted, it's only 2 weeks. I don't like to say, oh, this guy's the front runner for MVP or anything like that. But through 2 weeks, I definitely think that he is the guy that you would look at right now and say, hey, he's probably the number one MVP candidate based off the first 2 weeks of play. Alvin Kamara had a great game, 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown, and the Cowboys just got thoroughly manhandled by the New Orleans Saints. As I mentioned last podcast, I feel like the Saints have had a great defense for many years now, and they continue to show their defensive prowess against the Cowboys on Sunday. So we'll see if they can keep it rolling heading into week 3, but that was the second win. Saints +6, wins outright 44-19 over the Dallas Cowboys. The third against the spread pick that won, we had Tampa Bay Buccaneers +7.5 against the Detroit Lions, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win outright 20-16, and the Lions just didn't look good. Jared Goff, he's so up and down. For 3, 4, 5 weeks, he looks like an MVP quarterback, and then he always has one of these games where he doesn't look like he's reading the defense well. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns thrown, 16 points total for the Detroit Lions is just not going to get the job done. And Todd Bowles, head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what an underrated head coach this guy is in the league. He got killed for his tenure with the New York Jets when the New York Jets were awful, right? They didn't have a great roster, and he kind of ate the blame for that. But he has been one of the best defensive coordinators in the league for a decade probably at this point. And he sat and waited his turn with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bruce Arians was the head coach when Tom Brady first joined. They led him to a Super Bowl. Arians retires a year or so after that, along with Tom Brady retiring, and Todd Bowles gets to jump in and be the head coach of that football team. Last year was a breakout year for Baker Mayfield, and the Buccaneers looked great last year with Baker Mayfield. And to start this year, Baker Mayfield has not skipped a beat. He picked up right where he left off last year. Unbelievable game for Baker Mayfield. Rushing touchdown, passing touchdown, and he looks like a completely different player than what he looked like when he played for the Cleveland Browns. And that's a testament to the development that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff has, done with him. It's the confidence they've given him, and it just continues to make the Cleveland Browns look like an inferior organization compared to the remainder of the league. That was the third win of the week, right? Yeah, third win. So 7.5 points, Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Lions. Easy cover. It was an outright win. Gotta love it. And the fourth win out of the 5 that we had this week is I had the Arizona Cardinals -1 versus the Los Angeles Rams, and that was another straight outright domination win. Cardinals 41-10 over the Rams. The Rams had no answer for anything. Stafford's under pressure. Their offensive line, as I mentioned last podcast, is in shambles after week 1. All 5 linemen are hurt. You lose your number 1 or number 2 receiver, Puka Nacua. Last year he was your number 1 with Kupp out. Now that Kupp's with him this year, he's probably considered your number 2 because Cooper Kupp is such a great receiver. But that leads me into the injuries. Cooper Kupp now is hurt. He got hurt this week after Nacua got hurt last week, and the Rams are in some serious trouble right now. It seems like Cooper Kupp's going to be going to IR. Puka Nacua's already on IR. They don't have an offensive line to protect Stafford, and now they also have a lot of unproven receivers that they're going to have to throw the ball to. They're really going to have to figure out the run game with a weak offensive line in order to get some release or some pressure relieved off of Matt Stafford in order for them to have a chance. But starting the season 0-2, the Rams are definitely in a tight spot right now where they could see their season go south very, very quickly, and it's only 2 weeks into the season. The Arizona Cardinals, though, unbelievable game. Kyler Murray played great, similar to how he looked in the first half against the Buffalo Bills in week 1. 17 for 21, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he got his number one weapon, their number one overall draft pick, Marvin Harrison Jr. involved. 4 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison finally had a breakout game. After the first week, he kind of had a dud, but he really showed why he was drafted, where he was drafted. He should continue to do really well. And then they complemented it with their run game. James Conner, 21 carries for 122 yards. And, that really dominated the entire game for the Arizona Cardinals. So 4-1, I can't complain with that. We're going to keep track of the record throughout the season here. Obviously, we missed week 1 as my first podcast came after week 1 was already concluded. But we'll start with week 2 here. Week 2, first week that we gave you the against the spread picks, and we're at 4-1. I normally kind of think I would be 1-4, but we had a great week this week, and hopefully we can continue to do so. And if you guys are taking my picks, which not necessarily that I recommend you take any of my picks, hopefully you guys will make some money, and hopefully I will too. So a great week 2 in the NFL. Definitely looking forward to week 3 on Thursday, or beginning on Thursday. And we'll have another podcast out for you basically to go over against the spread picks for this upcoming weekend's games as well. Injuries were crazy this week in the NFL. I mean, if you have a fantasy football team, you're probably over there wanting to pull your hair out like I am. I have one team with 5 guys who are basically going to be on IR or out multiple weeks at this point. The biggest injuries that happened this week, you have Cooper Kupp go down for the Los Angeles Rams, which leaves them with absolutely nothing. It sounds like he's going to have to be put on IR, had to leave in a walking boot outside the stadium after the game. Not a good, not an ideal injury for the Los Angeles Rams. And we'll see how they can overcome all these massive injuries they have between their offensive line and their 2-star wide receivers. The Kansas City Chiefs took a huge blow this week. Isaiah Pacheco diagnosed with a broken fibula. Going to be out at least 6 to 8 weeks. One of my fantasy football players, he's got to go on an IR slot. One player that I'm not going to drop because he is a producer when he's out there, plays for a team that produces. But brutal blow for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not that I'm mad about it, as like I said, I'm not a Chiefs fan, but I am a fan of my fantasy football team, and I definitely don't like to see him go down because it makes it that much harder to win week by week. You had Justin Jefferson have a great game for the Minnesota Vikings. He had a 97-yard touchdown catch. One of the top 3 receivers in this league, Justin Jefferson. Later in the game, comes down with a quad injury. He's not able to come back into the game, and now it looks like he might be down and out for a couple of weeks. We talked about it in the last podcast. We had Tua Tagovailoa, pretty scary concussion yet again for him. He's going to be out for sure this upcoming week, and he's meeting with neurologists and going to get some expert opinions on how long he should be out, what the right steps to recovery are. So he may be out for multiple weeks at this point. And then for my Los Angeles Chargers, we lost Justin Herbert. Didn't necessarily lose him, but he got rolled up on his ankle in the third quarter. He was hobbling around a little bit, came off the field, ended up being able to return and continue to play and finish out the game. Today he had X-rays. X-rays were negative on that ankle and that leg, which is positive news, but it doesn't necessarily rule out any tissue damage or ligament damage or anything like that that could have happened. So his status is up in the air for this upcoming weekend. The only upside to his injury is he was able to finish the game, unlike the rest of these guys, and we'll see what the doctors decide, and we'll see what the medical staff recommendations for Justin Herbert are going into week 3. So great week of the NFL, some unbelievable games that were really close, some games that were total blowouts, but I don't think the NFL is disappointed through 2 weeks so far. I think we've gotten everything we've wanted, close games, high drama. And my game of the week this week was Kansas City and Cincinnati, and they didn't disappoint either. It came down to the last drive, the last game, came to a last-second field goal. Harrison Butker kicks a field goal with 3 seconds left to win the game. Controversial pass interference call that went in the Chiefs' favor, which I understand a lot of people look at it, and myself included, it seems like the Chiefs get every damn call. They really are the New England Patriots of the, 2000s, 2010s, whatever, where every time something happens, you're like, damn, they got another call. Damn, how did they get that call? That's not pass interference. At the end of the day, it's a bang bang play. If you slow it down on replay, the defender was clearly into the receiver's back, before the ball ever got there. It was most likely the right call, pass interference, but in a bang bang, very close, tight game like that, you would like to see the players decide it, not necessarily the refs. So I can understand people's frustration with that, but the rule book would tell you that that was pass interference, and that was the correct call that the refs made on that game. But game of the week didn't disappoint. I gave it to you guys on my last podcast. That's what I thought was going to be. It was another classic. It wasn't as high scoring, 25-23 or somewhere around in there, I believe. Let's take a look just to give you the correct score on that. We had the Chiefs 26-25. That's what it was. They were down 25-23 before Butker kicked the field goal. Ends up giving them the win, 26-25 on the last second field goal. Chiefs are now 2-0, and the Bengals are now 0-2. Great week of the NFL. Can't wait to talk a little bit more about the NFL for next weekend with you guys on the next podcast. But for now, we're going to go ahead and transition over to some updates here with the Major League Baseball playoff races and see how everybody's doing there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up here and share with you guys what that looks like for the wild card. So as you can see right here, let me go and zoom in a little bit for you. Whoops. There we go. So this is the American League wildcard standings, as I kind of went over a little bit with you guys there at the beginning. Was look at how close this has become. We have the Detroit Tigers only 1.5 games back of the Minnesota Twins. Minnesota continuing to not necessarily play too great, scuffling 3-7 in their last 10 games, while meanwhile we have the Detroit Tigers at 7-3 in their last 10 games on a 2-game win streak. You have Minnesota currently still on a 1-game losing streak, and 1.5 games is all that separates them. But you also have the Mariners coming into play now. The Mariners are on a 3-game win streak, 7-3, and they're only 2 games back. So this has turned into a 3-man or a 3-team race for the very last American League wildcard spot. And a week ago, Minnesota had a 3-4 game lead on these guys. They really need to turn it on if they want to make the playoffs, because as of right now, if they continue to play the way they've been playing, they're going to get overtaken by either the Detroit Tigers or the Seattle Mariners. And I'm sure that's not going to be a good sign or anything that their fans and their organization is going to be excited about. So we'll see if they can hang on here. But that's really the only race in the American League left. Baltimore Orioles still are 3 games back of the New York Yankees for the division, and that's the tightest division race you have in the American League right now. So, we'll see how it plays out with the American League. I honestly feel like Seattle has maybe the best overall roster. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Seattle maybe sneak past Detroit and Minnesota in this. But baseball, anything can happen, and it looks like they have these teams have played 79, so that's 80 and 70, 150 games. So 12 games left for them. 11 or 12, just depending on the team. Between 11 and 12 games left for each team left in the majors. And it's going to be a tight race to the finish here for the American League wildcard spot, the last playoff spot available. Over to the National League. So tonight, Padres had another huge win against the Houston Astros. Houston Astros lead their division, American League West, by a few games there over the Seattle Mariners. And the Padres, I wouldn't say destroyed them tonight, but they won pretty convincingly. Yu Darvish looked like vintage Yu Darvish. 6 innings pitched, under 80 pitches, 0 earned runs. He leaves the game. They're up 2-0. The bullpen comes in. Jason Adam lights out in the 7th inning again, like normal. His ERA is down to like $1.50, or $1.80. I'm sorry. Unbelievable since he's come over at the deadline from Tampa Bay. And then you brought in Tanner Scott, who scuffled a little bit tonight. Did give up 1 run, a couple hits, a run, a walk, but he ended up getting himself out of the jam, preserved the lead 2-1. Bottom of the 8th inning, Jurickson Profar doing what he does all year long, hitting clutch, hitting big homers, comes up first at bat, takes the pitcher deep, gives us that one run right back that Tanner Scott gave away the inning prior. And that's pretty much the story of the Padres season. Clutch, big hits, late innings, jerks and Profar, Jackson Merrill, you name it, they're making things happen for this team. They're currently at 3.5 games ahead of the New York Mets, who currently hold the last wild card spot. The Braves definitely not been playing great baseball, dropped below the New York Mets by 1 game now. We're going to go ahead and see what happens. As a Padres fan, as maybe a homer of the Padres or whatever you want to call me, I really feel like this team right here has a chance to overtake the division. The only hindrance or the only thing that's going to make it really difficult is the Dodgers schedule. Outside of us having to play the Padres-Dodgers for 3 games here in about a week, the Dodgers get to play the Miami Marlins. They get to play like 6 games against the Colorado Rockies. So the Padres are going to need to hope for really bad teams to beat the Dodgers to help us. We're only 3.5 games behind the Dodgers for the division right now. So I do feel like if the Dodgers scuffle up a little bit against some of those bad teams, you lose maybe a series, you lose 2 out of 3 to one of them, that'll give the Padres the chance to overtake them, but it will require the Padres most likely sweeping the Dodgers all 3 games when they meet the second to last series of the season. So we'll see what happens. The Arizona Diamondbacks lost they haven't been as hot as they were. As you can see, they're 4-6 in their last 10 games. They did lose again tonight, which helps the Padres, right? They are now 2.5 games ahead of the Diamondbacks for the number 1 wild card spot. We want that home series in the wild card. We don't want to have to go on the road. So Padres are maintaining exactly where they need to be. They've definitely continued to stay hot. 21 games over 500. First time since 2010 that the Padres have been that far over 500. And we'll see what happens here over the last 11 or 12 games of the season for every one of these teams. And we'll cross our fingers that the Padres are able to hold that top wild card spot and possibly even make a run for the division against the Dodgers. We're going to go ahead and just recap a couple other things that happened over the weekend for UFC fans. We had probably the biggest UFC event that's ever happened or ever been held at the new Sphere in Las Vegas over the weekend. Headlined by Sean O'Malley versus Merab. And Merab, I'm sorry, I don't necessarily know how to pronounce. It's like Davalashi or Davalashi. His last name's a little difficult to pronounce, but before the fights or a couple days before the UFC event, one of my buddies had asked me, he says, do you think O'Malley is going to win? And it was a good question because every time I've watched Sean O'Malley fight, if I feel like he's not going to win. Like I feel like he's going to lose. Like I never feel confident about it because he's the type of fighter who searches for that one knockout punch. He doesn't have a full repertoire of MMA moves. He's not good on the ground. He has struggled to defend takedowns, and Merab literally took advantage of that. Merab was 6 for 10 on his takedowns. He had 10 minutes of ground control on O'Malley. O'Malley just looked overmatched. He was not confident when he was on his feet because he was so concerned about being taken down again. He really needs to work on his takedown defense, and he needs to work on his ground game moving forward. But O'Malley did take the loss to Merab. Merab dominated him. He won all 5 rounds, in my opinion. And it wasn't a very exciting fight because it was a lot of, I tackled him to the ground and, now I'm laying on top of him and trying to control his arms and his hands. And, the 2 title fights were probably the worst fights of this whole event. And if you go back and watch Dana White's press conference afterwards, he kind of alludes to that. He wasn't too happy with the last 2 fights, which were supposed to be the main event fights, the title fights, because there was a lot of ground game involved, which is not necessarily appealing or exciting for people who are watching on TV. And it's also not maybe all that exciting for people who are there live in person. I know for me as a UFC fan, I love watching people just get punched right in their face over and over again, back and forth. I want it to be a war. And these last two fights that were supposed to be the cream of the crop fights were just not it. But Merab dominates Sean O'Malley to take his title, his light heavy or bantamweight title. And it wasn't close. So O'Malley has some work to go back and, some things to go back and work on. And maybe next time he'll have a better game plan and he'll be more prepared to hopefully earn his title back. As somebody who is a Sean O'Malley fan, I definitely would have liked to see him win, but I also know there's weaknesses in his game or in his fighting that prevented him from being able to have a better performance against Merab. So the other title fight of the night was in the women's division. We had Valentina Shevchenko against Alexa Grasso. Grasso was the champion. She had already beaten Shevchenko twice prior to this. So it was a trilogy fight, which after a trilogy fight, there's not usually another fight after that. You don't usually go 4 times against the same person unless you lose the third time, right? So Alexa Grasso won the first 2 fights, defending, took the title, then defended the title. Now she was trying to defend it against Shevchenko again, and she ends up losing. Shevchenko had a very similar game plan to Merab against Sean O'Malley. Ground game. Take her to the ground, frustrate her, and that's exactly what happened. I think Dana White was more frustrated about the whole thing than maybe even Alexa Grasso was, because the only thing that happened in the fight was Shevchenko laying on the ground on top of Grasso with ground control. Not an exciting fight, but it got the job done for her, right? She ends up retaking the title, and we'll see if there is a fourth fight. Since Alexa Grasso did lose, she may be entitled to a rematch to try and see if she can win that title back. But I think everybody would be excited to see a different challenger at this point and not just watching the same fighters fight over and over again. Couple of the best fights of the night were the non-title fights. I mean, there were 2 fights that I loved. Diego Lopez against Brian Ortega. So about 2 months ago, this Diego Lopez kid, up and coming in the UFC, takes a fight on like 3 days notice, right? Like there was a bunch of stuff going on, injuries, sickness, whatever. And they needed some fill-in fighters for UFC about 2 months ago. And this Diego Lopez kid says, yeah, sure, I'll take a fight. Comes in, dominates the fight. I mean, just people were like, man, look at this guy's power. He's kind of small, but I mean, those punches pack some power. And Diego Lopez made a name for himself 2 months ago. He ends up getting added to this card against Brian Ortega. So Diego Lopez goes from not being a ranked contender to winning a fight on 3 days notice. Now he's the number 12 contender going into this fight, and he's going to fight the number 3 contender in his division, who is Brian Ortega. And Ortega got absolutely dominated, okay? Diego Lopez, he could have knocked the guy out in the first round. He had him stunned, and he probably made a mistake by jumping on top of him and going to the ground to fight him on the ground. If he would have let him back up on his feet, he would have definitely been able to most likely knock him out because he was hurt. He wasn't, his head, Brian Ortega's head is just, spinning like, oh my gosh, he's trying to recover. And for those of you who maybe don't watch UFC enough, they'll always tell you, you get to recover on the ground. Sure, you're having to, play defense and make sure you're not getting put into a submission hold or anything like that. But when you're stunned, almost knocked out from getting punched in your face, laying on the ground is one of the worst things that your opponent can let you do because it allows you to recover. And that's kind of what happened to Ortega in this, is he did recover. The fight went all 5 rounds. It ended up going to a decision, which, it went 3 rounds because it wasn't a title fight. It went all 3 rounds rather than it ending in round 1. But all 3 rounds scored for Diego Lopez, 30-27, unanimous decision, and he overtakes the number 3 contender spot. So 3 months ago, this guy was not even a ranked contender. And in 3 months, now he's the number 3 contender, which you could argue that there are a handful of third-ranked contenders that have gotten a title fight next. He most likely won't be in a title fight in his next fight, but if he ends up having to fight the number 1 or the number 2 ranked contender under the champion, depending on how that fight goes, he may well earn himself a title chance. And he's only fought in the UFC, 3 or 4 times So good for him, up and coming star Diego Lopez. If you'd like to watch good hands, good boxing, good striking, Diego Lopez is somebody you're going to want to go take a look at. And then the other fight and I'll be honest, this was the best fight of the night. Esteban Ribovics against Daniel Zellhuber, best fight of the night. I mean, just nonstop, both fighters punching each other, kicking each other. It went all 3 rounds. There were so many times where I thought Zellhuber was going to go down. This Ribovics guy probably punched him 50 to 100 times when he was stunned one time up against the cage. And Zellhuber, yeah, he looked like he was about to fall to the ground, but he never did. He ended up responding with an elbow that puts Ribovics to the floor. Ribovics ends up winning by a decision. It's probably the right decision. I mean, I think he definitely clearly won. He definitely had more power behind all of his punches. But if you were to go ask Dana White, I'm sure he would tell you this was by far the best fight of the night. Both of these guys left it all out in the octagon, and they both deserve to, win the fight most likely, right? That's the type of performance it was. Is you wouldn't have been mad with anybody who won that fight because it was that great of a fight. So UFC 306 in the Sphere in Las Vegas. If you didn't get to watch it on TV, what an unbelievable experience that Sphere is. I could only imagine being there in person. When this event first got planned, Dana White was saying how this is the only time it's ever going to happen, and we'll never have another event here. Let me just tell you right now, they are 100% having another event in the Sphere. Dana White didn't say it was for sure in the press conference afterwards, but he also didn't say it wasn't possible, which before this event even got planned, this is the only one ever. Money always talks. They generated an unreal amount of money by having it there. This will definitely be coming back to the Sphere at some point again. So those are the major things that happened over the weekend from the NFL, Major League Baseball, UFC, and just to go over a couple of things here at the end of it. We're 2 weeks away from my San Diego State men's basketball preview coming out. Some of the biggest news since then is that San Diego State is going to be joining the Pac-12 conference, along with Boise State. Memphis just got added here earlier this evening. Fresno State, some of the big, solid Mountain West schools are going to be joining the Pac-12 in 2026. I can't express enough, and this goes for football and basketball. It's both sports, but San Diego State basketball maybe doesn't need to be in a power conference because they are in a non-power 5 conference right now, but they get maybe treated or looked at like they're a power 5 school. But this will definitely help our football program, and it'll probably allow us to recruit better and give us higher rated recruits. But the San Diego State men's basketball, we're going to have some tough in-conference opponents. They're currently working on hopefully trying to get Gonzaga into the same Pac-12. Last year the Aztecs were debating, do we join the Big Ten? But you got to understand that the travel, when you are in the Big Ten, you got to travel to the Midwest a lot. And that is a lot of travel time on your players and a lot of financial commitment to have a lot of plane flights and things like that for your student athletes. So this is a much, much better decision. I'm glad something was finally able to get agreed to, and now they'll be able to stay on the West Coast just playing some, tougher opponents, which is what we want for the San Diego State Aztecs, because that's always been the knock. Oh, you're in the Mountain West Conference. The Mountain West doesn't have anybody good. Well, now we're going to see how people really think about us, and we'll see how good we really are as we get to play higher competition all the time. But 2 weeks away, San Diego State men's basketball preview, where we'll go over a little bit more about the transition to the Pac-12, and then we'll also go ahead and review or preview the roster and the potential starting lineups that we're going to be getting here this upcoming season. The only other thing I'll do a little bit of a special on here in the next week is the race for World First for World of Warcraft begins later today. It is a little after midnight here on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday morning, I'm going to wake up here in a little while. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Twitch and I'm going to put on World of Warcraft Race for World First. The new raid comes out. The 2 top guilds about to go in there. 15, 16 hours straight. Kill some bosses. Can't wait to see what happens. I'll do a little segment or a little separate podcast just covering the events that happen during the Race for World First. So if you're interested in any of that sort of stuff, definitely be on the lookout for it. This will go ahead and conclude episode number 4 of the Unwritten Rules with Tmac. I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll talk to you guys soon.